Have you ever heard of a pope being elected in a thrift shop?
A thrift shop.
Yeah, not exactly the Vatican, right?
Not quite the image that comes to mind, no?
Today we're diving into the story of David Bowden, Pope Michael I, who was elected in, well, you guessed it,
A thrift shop.
a thrift shop.
Huh?
Bellevue, Kansas, to be exact.
Wow, okay. That's that's quite a story.
It really is. But to understand it, we need to go back a bit to the idea of anti-popes.
Ah, like during the Western Schism back in the 14th century?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Multiple people claiming to be the true pope, each with their own followers. It really shook things up.
For sure, it challenged the whole concept of papal authority, kind of like what we're seeing with David Bowden, although on a much smaller scale,
Right,
obviously.
right. And speaking of challenges to authority, that brings us to Vatican II in the 20th century. Big changes in the Catholic Church, right?
It's huge. Allowing Mass in other languages, not just Latin. Trying to, modernize things a bit.
But not everyone was happy about it. That's where sedevacantism comes in.
Yeah, the belief that all the popes since Pius XII, who died in 1958, are illegitimate.
Because of those Vatican II reforms.
Yep. So to them, the seat of the papacy has been vacant all these years.
Hence the need for a new pope, at least in their eyes. What about David Bowden's family? Were they always sedevacantists?
Well, they were deeply traditional, that's for sure. Started out with the Society of St. Pius X.
The group that celebrates the old Latin Mass, right?
Yeah, but they still recognized the Pope in Rome. Bowden, though, he took it further. Became disillusioned with the society, felt they weren't traditional enough.
And his family, they were sedevacantists.
Strongly so. So that definitely shaped his thinking.
It's hard to imagine holding a papal election in a thrift shop. Did they really believe they were, electing a real pope?
Absolutely. They were serious about it. And remember, this was the early days of the internet.
So he could connect with followers online.
Exactly. He started a blog, called it Vatican in Exile, used it to share his views, criticize the Vatican, all that.
Pretty savvy for the time.
Definitely. He was ahead of the curve in using the internet to build a community, even if it was a very unconventional one.
What kind of things did he talk about on his blog?
A lot of it was about what he saw as the decline of morality in modern society. Things like abortion, homosexuality.
Pretty controversial stuff?
Very much so. And of course, we don't endorse those views in any way, but it's important to understand what drove his movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we have this self-proclaimed pope running things from a thrift shop, using the internet to spread his very conservative message. Who are his followers?
Small group, but very devoted. There's this documentary from 2011 that gives you a glimpse into their world. Shows Bowden having dinner with his mom, decorating his chapel, which is, get this, in his mother's attic.
In the attic. Wow.
And he's wearing aviator sunglasses, a trench coat, running errands. Not your typical image of a pope.
Definitely not. But it seems like that down-to-earth style appealed to his followers.
Oh, for sure. They had this incredible access to his life, unlike anything you'd see with the Vatican.
But surely not everyone accepted him as pope. I mean, there must have been pushback, right?
Oh, yeah, tons. Mainstream Catholics saw him as a heretic. Other sedevacantists questioned how he was elected. Even some of his own family didn't believe it.
Really? His family?
His brother publicly said he didn't believe it, and someone who helped organize the election later denounced him.
Wow. So even within his own family, there was controversy.
Definitely. And then you had the media calling him the junk store pope, the thrift shop pope. He claimed to get death threats, too.
It sounds like he really ruffled some feathers.
He did, but he stuck to his guns, even filed police reports about those threats.
So what happened to him? Did he, stay pope for the rest of his life?
He died in 2022 at 63. And what's interesting is that his obituary doesn't mention him being pope at all. Just says he was Father David Bowden, talks about his community work.
So a quiet end to a very unconventional life.
Yeah, you could say that. But the story doesn't end there. Remember those loyal followers? They decided to have another conclave.
Another one. After he died.
Yep. And this time they held it in Vienna, Austria.
Okay, so things are getting a bit more, shall we say, upscale.
A little bit.
Well, we'll have to delve into that next time. But this is really something else.
It is.
A pope from a thrift shop. Who would have thought?
It's a fascinating story, and it really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. Another conclave in Vienna. It seems like things are getting, well, maybe a little more official.
From a thrift shop to Vienna, it is quite a jump, isn't it? Moving up in the world, maybe.
So who was in the running to be the next pope?
A couple of American priests, 2 bishops, too, all very much in line with Pope Michael I's, traditionalist views.
Archbishop Martinez, he was there, right? The one who brought the movement to the Philippines.
Oh, yeah. He was the chairman of the whole thing, a big role for
I
him.
mean, the Philippines is mostly Catholic, right? So for him to bring this movement there, that's saying something.
It definitely shows they're thinking bigger. And Martinez, he's quite a leader,
Hmm.
charismatic.
And a staunch traditionalist, I imagine.
Oh, yeah, definitely. He was completely dedicated to Pope Michael I's vision. So they had their conclave, and guess what?
They elected a new pope.
They did. But get this, the priest they chose, he actually turned it down.
Turned it down. Why would anyone do that?
I know, right? It's a lot to take on. But Martinez, he gave him like 2 days to think it over, but the priest stuck to his decision.
Wow, so what happened next?
They had to vote again. And this time, they chose Martinez himself to be the new pope.
Wait, he was the chairman, and then they elected him.
I know, it's kind of strange, but they're a small group, very tight-knit. Maybe they felt he was the obvious choice and he felt, like it was God's will or something.
So he became Pope Michael II.
That's right, Pope Michael II, carrying on the legacy, you see.
So from a thrift shop to the Philippines, what did people think about all this? I mean, the Vatican must have had something to say.
Pope Francis hasn't really commented publicly, and officially, the Vatican doesn't recognize any of this, of course.
But they must be aware of it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. In the Philippines, some local church officials even threatened excommunication for anyone who followed Pope Michael II.
So this little group, they're really challenging the Vatican's authority.
They are. It's this tiny movement taking on this huge institution, and it all started in a thrift shop.
The internet really changed things, didn't it?
It did. It gave a voice to groups like this that might have gone unnoticed before. They can connect with each other, spread their message. It's a whole new world.
So what about Pope Michael II and his followers? What happens now? Do they just keep going?
Well, that's the big question. It'll be interesting to see what happens next.
We've come a long way from that thrift shop in Kansas, haven't we?
We have. It's been quite a journey.
It really makes you think, about faith, about leadership, about how things are changing.
Absolutely. It's like, what even is religious authority these days?
Exactly. And David Bowden, he was like a pioneer in a way, using the internet to build his Vatican in exile.
He really was ahead of his time, creating this online community, reaching people all over the world.
And we're seeing more and more of that now, aren't we? Online religious communities, people finding their own ways to connect with their faith.
It's definitely a trend. And for institutions like the Catholic Church, I think it's a real challenge.
They can't just ignore it, can they?
Not if they want to stay relevant.
Do you think they'll adapt? I mean, will we see more acceptance of these different ways of practicing faith?
It's hard to say. I think there will always be resistance to change, But at the same time, things are changing, whether they like it or not.
It's like this tug of war between tradition and, well, the future, I guess.
Exactly. And the thrift shop pope, he's like a symbol of that.
Right. This totally unexpected figure shaking things up.
It shows you that faith, it can pop up anywhere. And leadership, it doesn't always look like what we expect.
So, to everyone listening out there, what do you think?
What does this story tell you about, your own beliefs, the communities you're part of? What do you think the future of religion looks like?
It's a big question, but it's worth thinking about. And that's what the deep dive is all about.
Exploring these ideas, these stories that make us question, that make us learn.
And hopefully have some interesting conversations along the way.
Exactly. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And until next time, keep exploring.